Hello whisky fans, welcome to a festive Christmas whisky review. This is a fine Christmas malt 2021 Highland single malt Scotch whisky. This is a 16-year-old whisky, and this is a special edition independently bottled whisky from the Whisky Exchange. So a few months ago I reviewed the April Fool's whisky from the Whisky Exchange, which it was called something like Extremely Young. And the joke was that when you shine a UV light over it, it's revealed to be a 30-year-old whisky. I've actually tried the UV torch on this one to see if there's anything, and there isn't. But yeah, this is a special whisky released by the Whisky Exchange for Christmas this year. I imagine that it's available exclusively from the Whisky Exchange, and I think it's still available for just under £80 here in the UK. Only problem is, being a Christmas whisky, obviously still got the wax seal on there, so I'm unable to try it and share it with you guys. And if you believe that, you'll believe anything. Because I'm not waiting for that. I've already broken the seal. I've tried this one a few times and I've really been enjoying it. Whisky Exchange is not a sponsor because nobody is a sponsor of Whisky Lock. We are independent here. This one was bought with my own money because I thought it sounded good. And in particular, something that really made me want to try this one is that they advertise it as being from a mystery distillery on the Isle of Orkney. So for anyone that doesn't know, there are two distilleries on Orkney. There's the famous Highland Park, and there's the quite a lot less famous and less prestigious Scapa. So when I saw this one for sale for about £80, 16 years old, 53.2%, which you would think is either cask strength or very close to cask strength, I think a lot of people like myself would think, well, it's going to be Scapa, right? Well, we'll see. As for the details on the label, because there is no box for this one, which is not necessarily a bad thing because recycling and waste and all that stuff. Details on the bottle is 53.2% ABV. We don't know if that's cask strength, but I imagine it probably is. We don't know if it is non-chill filtered, although looking at the whiskey in the glass, I have added some water to this one beforehand, and I've added a little bit more, probably brought that down to about 44%, which is more than it needs. But I was just trying to see if we could get any haziness, and I think a little bit. Not too much. So as for non-chill filtering, not sure, maybe not. And we don't know if it's natural colour either. But from the colour of that, I would have thought it probably is natural colour. But again, Whisky Exchange haven't told us, so we don't know. If Billy from Whisky Exchange is watching, it would be great if we could have some more details. Other than that, we know that it's a Highland single malt, which obviously it would be if it's from Scapa, and it's 16 years old. And if you do a little bit of research online, you'll see that this is a limited release of 2,200 bottles. So that's just about small batch. So you're probably talking around half a dozen casks, rather than the dozens and dozens of casks that you get in a lot of limited edition releases. So I have prepared this one earlier in true Blue Peter fashion. I've knocked this down to just under 46, something like that. I've tasted it before, obviously. Let's see what we've got. So, on the nose. So, a lovely fresh bracing nose, lots of sweet lemon, apple, and also, true to the name, it is a very Christmassy flavour profile. Getting lots of baking spices, quite cakey. There's also a really lovely butteriness to this one. A little bit of a creme brulee note, as well as lots of sweet sherry. So, sort of quite a Christmas cakey nose on this one. Some sweet sherry and some sweet bourbon as well. Actually reminds me a little bit of that it doesn't smell or taste like a 30-year-old whiskey, but it reminds me a little bit of that 30-year-old whiskey that Whisky Exchange bottled for April Fool's earlier this year, in that it's got some of those big, high-ish age statement bourbon matured whiskey notes. There is also quite some evident peat in there, some slightly damp and farmy peated grist, and also a lovely maritime saltiness to the nose on this one. Lovely, fresh, salty, saline sea air, a lovely bracing coastal element to this whiskey. Let's see how it tastes. So again, on the palate, lots of lovely sweet lemon notes, which is something that I really like. I like my sharp whiskies. In particular, I like my bourbon matured whiskies, or whiskies that have a strong bourbon maturation note in them. Lots of old malt. Actually, probably tastes a little bit older than 16 years old, which is always something that I appreciate as well. Getting some lovely toffee apple notes. Whenever I taste apple in a whiskey like this, that always makes me think a little bit Highland Park, so maybe that's a little bit of a clue. Also a little bit of a cough sweet, slightly medicinal note to the peat. And again, on the palate, very salty, very, very salty. And again, there's a little bit of a slightly sooty aspect to the peat on this one. Slightly sooty peat, salty, bracing maritime peat, and just a warming sort of fire embers, sort of ashy, smoky peatiness. It's all obviously very subtle because this is a whiskey. It's either from Highland Park or Scapa, and neither of those are huge peat bombs. It's not got those Isla peaty notes in it. It's all just really lovely, warming, sort of background, subtle peatiness. As for the finish, getting lots of old malt, so you can tell this is a really well matured whiskey. Lots of those warming spices, and again, more old peat notes. So sort of old peated whiskey, so stale, sort of oily smokiness, and just lingering on the late palate in the finish, just a really pleasant bitterness. One thing that I do really want to point out on this one is I've been reviewing quite a few Highland Park whiskies lately, and probably a lot of those videos I haven't released by the time you're watching this. But one of the things that always disappoints me with a lot of official bottlings of Highland Park is that sometimes even at 46%, and especially those Highland Parks that are released at lower than 46%, they just don't have the power, the intensity, and the fullness to the palate. They just don't have that power to carry the flavours, and this one does. I mentioned that I'd added a little bit more water to this one than I have been previously to see if I could get any sort of haziness, get any hints that this might be chill filtered or otherwise. So I've knocked this down probably to about 44%, and it still carries the flavours perfectly. It's not underpowered at all, even though I've knocked the ABV down to a lower point than I normally would. As for a grade, I'm going to give this an A-. I think it's absolutely fantastic whiskey, and I'm really going to enjoy this one. To be fair, I probably will put this away for Christmas. After I finish this one, I'll probably return the wax seal and save that for the holidays. So what distillery is it from? Because you've always got to take that bait, haven't you, and sort of play the game, try and guess the distillery when they issue a mystery malt. As I said, I entirely expected this to be Scapa, and I think it still could be, but then I think it's entirely possible that this actually could be Highland Park. I'll be perfectly honest, I've tried pretty much all of the Scapa official bottlings that have been available over the last sort of 10 plus years, and I haven't really liked any of them. I think that Scapa is a very underrated and underappreciated distillery, and part of that is the fault of the distillery, because the whiskies that they present under their own name have not really been that good. But a lot of the independently bottled Scapas that I've had have been absolutely phenomenal, especially the sort of Scapa whiskies that I've had from kind of the 16 to mid 20-year-old whiskies have been really, really nice. As for this whisky, I think that this flavour profile, the fruitiness and the peat, I think it could really be either one. It could be Highland Park or Scapa. And I think the important thing is, when it's that inconclusive and too close to call, does it really matter? The bottom line is that if this is Highland Park, it's probably really good value. And if it's not Highland Park, still a cracking dram. So really interested to hear what you guys think about this one, if you've been lucky enough to get a hold of one of these. Do you think it's Highland Park, or do you think it's Scapa? Or do you just not care? Thanks for watching. Early Merry Christmas for a few weeks' time, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.